Hi, I'm Drew Campbell. I'm the editor of I3 Institutional Investing in Infrastructure at IREI. So two trends or two stories that are related in the current issue, the September issue, are by Caledon or CBRE Caledon, Andreas Kottering and Martin Day. They have a feature called Infrastructure 2.0, Investing to Create Tomorrow's Economy. And it focuses on how investors and private capital can work with local authorities, so local government, to help them make the transition to net zero carbon emissions. And another feature, it's a Q&A with Rick Geddes at the American Enterprise Institute. So the United States is unique in that it has a municipal bond market, which is how a lot of infrastructure is financed. And it helps governments design and build infrastructure. But in some areas where it lacks is doing the long-term operations and maintenance of that infrastructure. And so over time, if you think about the 1950s and the highway system, that was one of the last large government-sponsored at the federal level infrastructure projects, and that took decades to complete. And so that's the federal government investing in infrastructure. At the local level, the same thing happens. Local bridges and roads and transit systems are financed with municipal debt backed by taxpayers. And so that's what people in government have become accustomed to. And they get a good rate on that municipal finance. So it's a good interest rate. And so it makes sense for governments to choose that option because it's low financing. So imagine if you were going to buy a home, you go and you shop for a mortgage, and you're going to often go with the mortgage provider that's giving you the best rate. And so it's sort of an easy choice and decisions for local government to do the municipal financed route. And that covers designing the infrastructure and building it, but it often leaves out contracting over the long term. So infrastructure lasts for 40, 50, 60, some cases 100 years or more. And it's got to be maintained. And when there's budget crunches, infrastructure can often money for infrastructure can be kicked down the road, so to speak. And that's what's happened in the United States. We hear a lot about poor infrastructure in the United States, bridges falling down, crumbling infrastructure. And that's it's generally true, but not true across the board. There's some areas that have, fine infrastructure, but there's definitely some need. So what private capital can do, and that's largely public-private partnerships, where private capital investors work with government to either build new infrastructure or they can lease infrastructure. So a government will own a piece of infrastructure and then rent it to a private operator who then does the management of it. And that money can free up government from having to plow money into that piece of infrastructure, and they can use it for other purposes. And then when they make the lease, they get a sum of money too from the private investors. So it's just a different way of financing infrastructure using private capital. And it's not something that private investors and managers are expecting to completely replace municipal finance. It's just another option. We have hurricane season and wildfire seasons and natural disasters, and the consensus is pretty much formed that it's being driven. It's not entirely climate change, and climate change is making them more intense. And so communities and government, local government, is dealing with stronger hurricanes, stronger storms, flooding, wildfires, etc. And they're looking for solutions to how to manage through these. They need new infrastructure, innovative infrastructure cutting edge standards to help them, help infrastructure withstand and manage through these stronger events. And one way that can be accomplished is using private capital that can bring in new ways of operating infrastructure. In the case of a hurricane, you've probably got transmission lines going down, roads being washed out, and all that, everything else that comes with the storm and flooding. And think of the same sort of idea of new innovations coming into that infrastructure to help deal with storms and stronger weather. So it could just be stronger transmission line systems, it could be stronger different types of concrete or road materials, or different ways of building them and adapting them to understanding how storms and other weather events are going to interact with infrastructure. And the private sector is in a position to bring all that new technology to government. So it's up to government to sort of understand how private capital can work with them, and then be willing to work with private capital to help them sort of manage not just their infrastructure, but if you have private capital coming in to help them with deferred maintenance on infrastructure that the government just simply doesn't have the money to address, that takes that off their plate, and then they can go focus on other agenda items, whether that's schools hiring more teachers or public safety, etc. So we're publishing a special report. This is the second report in this series. It's called Innovation in Infrastructure Delivery. And it really focuses on private capital working with government, and in particular local government, state and local government, to address infrastructure needs. So last year's report was published in November, and again, we're going to publish in November. The focus this year is on asset management, so helping local governments understand and think about their infrastructure in an asset management framework. And so that entails, one, understanding their overall infrastructure portfolio. So what infrastructure assets are within their city or county boundaries or whatever their jurisdiction is, and just getting a handle on what they actually have and own. And then the second part of that would be putting a simple valuation on those assets and just getting a sense of the value of those assets. There's efforts to do that. There's Rice University has done a study of infrastructure assets and key infrastructure assets across the United States, and is doing a mapping project. And other communities have done this, have gone and put resources into doing just that, understanding what their infrastructure portfolio is. But not, there's too many communities that have not done that. And what's powerful about that is if you've got, say, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 towns or a county where every town has done that, and they all have an inventory of what their infrastructure is. A private investor could come in and go across the county and say there's, working with government, and say there's 10 assets here that need investment. They've got a lot of deferred maintenance. They're spread over 2, 3, 4 different cities within a county. But if you bundle these assets together, we can get private capital to invest in it. And these different cities in this county can all have an upgrade in their infrastructure. So that's what the special report is getting at, this year's special report.